You want half the inheritance? Then share my past.
The old man's hands shook as he opened the manila envelope, and I swear I saw tears in his eyes before he even looked at my name tag. That should have been my first warning that this wasn't going to be just another package delivery. "Jack Thompson," he whispered, reading my courier uniform. "Dear God, you're Henry Thompson's grandson, aren't you?" I stood there on the marble steps of this mansion I'd never seen before, holding a certified envelope that had taken me 20 minutes to find in the maze of old money neighborhoods outside Boston. The GPS had given up 3 streets back, and I'd been driving in circles past houses that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. "Yeah, that's right. Henry was my grandfather. How did you—" "Come in, son, please. We need to talk." Alden Rourke was maybe 80, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of hard years and harder choices. His mansion felt like a museum. Persian rugs, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, and the smell of old leather and older money. But there was something sad about it, too, like a tomb where the occupant wasn't quite dead yet. "Your grandfather saved my life in Korea," he said, settling into a chair that probably cost more than my truck. 1951. I was badly wounded in a ditch, and Henry Thompson pulled me to safety under enemy fire, carried me 2 miles to the medic station. Unmistaking. I'd heard some war stories from Grandpa before he died, but never this one. "Mr. Rourke, I appreciate you telling me this, but I've got 12 more deliveries today. I've been looking for your family for 70 years. His voice cracked. I promised Henry I'd repay him someday. Made a fortune in classic cars, real estate, investments. Never married, no kids. I've been waiting to find someone from his family line." Envelope in my hands suddenly felt heavier. "Sir, what exactly are you saying?" He stood up, walked to an antique safe in the corner, and pulled out a thick legal document. "I'm saying I want to leave you everything, Jack. The dealership, this house, the car collection, the investments, all of it. Millions went dry. That's impossible. You don't even know me." "I know enough. You're working honest, driving that beat-up courier truck, wearing a wedding ring that's seen better days. You've got your grandfather's eyes and his jawline. That's all I need to know." I looked down at my wedding ring, or what used to be my wedding ring. Vanessa had thrown it at me during the divorce proceedings 3 months ago, screaming about how I'd never amount to anything. I'd picked it up and kept wearing it out of habit more than hope. "Actually, sir, I'm divorced now. Recently divorced." His face softened. "Then maybe this is exactly the fresh start you need." The next hour passed like a dream. Rourke showed me around the mansion, the 6-car garage full of pristine vintage automobiles, and the classic car dealership he'd built from nothing. Thompson Classic Cars, he wanted to call it. The paperwork was already drawn up, witnessed, and notarized. All I had to do was sign. "There's just one condition," he said as we stood in his study. "I want to spend my remaining time getting to know Henry's grandson. I'm not long for this world, Jack. Heart condition. But I'd like to die knowing I kept my promise." Seizing the papers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. When I left that mansion, I was no longer just Jack Thompson, divorced courier driver living in a 2-bedroom rental. I was Jack Thompson, heir to a multi-million-dollar estate. I should have known Vanessa would find out within 24 hours. My phone started buzzing at 6 a.m. the next morning. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail like I had for the past 3 months. But something told me this call was different. "Hello, V?" "Jack, sweetie, I heard the most interesting news yesterday." Her voice had that fake honey coating she used when she wanted something. "Trish saw you at some mansion in Beacon Hill, with a very wealthy old man." Familiarity, of course. Vanessa's best friend and personal gossip network. The woman could smell drama from 3 counties away. "Just making a delivery, V. You know, work. That thing some of us do for a living." "Don't be cute, Jack. I also heard from Brady that there's been some interesting paperwork filed at the courthouse. Inheritance documents. With your name on them." Brady. Her new boyfriend. If you could call a 32-year-old man-child with a criminal record and a trust fund a boyfriend. He worked part-time at the courthouse doing filing, which mainly meant he had access to public records and too much time on his hands. Brady needs to mind his own business. Jack, honey, we need to talk. I think there might have been some mistake with our divorce settlement. If you've come into money, I might be entitled to journalists. You're entitled to exactly nothing, Vanessa. The papers were signed. You got the house, the car, and half my savings account, which wasn't much to begin with. But if this inheritance happened while we were still married, we've been divorced for 3 months. The paperwork was filed 6 months ago, Jack. Technically, we were still married when you met this old man. I felt my stomach drop. She was right, and she knew it. Vanessa had always been smart with legal loopholes. It's what made her so good at her corporate job and so dangerous as an ex-wife. I'll call you back, V. Jack, don't you dare hang up on... I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, Pete Morrison. He'd handled the divorce and had warned me that Vanessa wasn't the type to let things go easily. Jack, slow down, Pete said after I'd explained the situation. Yes, if the inheritance was promised or documented while you were still legally married, she might have a claim. But it depends on the specific timing and how the documents were written. Pete, this man has been looking for my family for 70 years. This isn't about me personally. It's about my grandfather. That's good. That helps. But you need to be careful, Jack. If Vanessa thinks there's money involved, she's going to fight dirty. He was right, of course. I'd learned that lesson the hard way during the divorce. Vanessa had systematically turned most of our mutual friends against me, painting me as a loser who was holding her back from her true potential. The fact that she'd been cheating on me with Brady for 6 months before she filed papers somehow became my fault for not being emotionally available. I was still thinking about Pete's warning when I pulled up to Rourke's mansion for our second meeting. The old man had invited me for dinner, wanting to hear stories about my grandfather and share some of his own memories from the war. But as I walked up the front steps, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted, and it had been there yesterday, too. When I knocked on Rourke's door, I mentioned it. "I've seen that car before," he said, his face darkening. "Started showing up about a week ago, right after I had my lawyer file the inheritance papers." "You think someone's watching the house?" "In my experience, son, when money's involved, people get very interested very quickly." Relinquent. We had dinner in his formal dining room. The first home-cooked meal I'd eaten in months that didn't come from a microwave. Rourke told me stories about my grandfather that I'd never heard, about his courage under fire and his sense of humor, even in the worst situations. Henry used to say that the measure of a man wasn't how he handled success, but how he handled people trying to take that success away from him, Rourke said over dessert. "I have a feeling you're going to need that wisdom soon." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "Had a lovely chat with your new friend today. He seems very sweet. And very lonely." Cancel. Ran cold. "Mr. Rourke, did anyone visit you today? A woman, blonde, probably very well-dressed and charming?" His face went pale. "About an hour after you left yesterday, yes. Said she was your wife, that she wanted to thank me for being so kind to her husband. I may have said more than I should have." Expelled. "What did you tell her?" Menstrual. "That I was happy to help Henry Thompson's grandson. That your grandfather deserved to have his family taken care of." She asked a lot of questions about the inheritance, about my health, about whether I had other family. I closed my eyes. Vanessa was already working her angles, and I'd been too naive to see it coming. "Mr. Rourke, I think you need to be very careful about who you talk to from now on. My ex-wife isn't the person she pretends to be." Histromal. Shells. "I'm beginning to understand that, son. But don't worry about me. I've survived worse than a gold-digging ex-wife." Famous last words. The next morning, I decided to stop by Murphy's Bar, the dive where I'd been drinking away my sorrows since the divorce. It was the kind of place where everybody knew your business, but they had the decency to pretend they didn't unless you brought it up first. Phil Kowalski was already there, nursing a beer and reading yesterday's sports section. Phil had been my best friend since high school, an ex-cop who'd retired early after taking a bullet in the leg during a domestic violence call. He was the only person who'd stuck by me through the divorce. Mainly because he'd never liked Vanessa in the first place. Well, well, Phil said as I sat down. If it isn't the heir apparent. Buy you a drink, Your Majesty? Dismissing. How did you, Jacket, you live in a town of 40,000 people, and you inherited a mansion from a war hero. It was on the front page of the local section this morning. He slid the newspaper across the bar. There it was, in black and white. Local courier installed $1 million estate from Korean War veteran. The photo showed me shaking hands with Rourke outside his dealership, both of us smiling. Great. Just what I needed. Hey, I'm happy for you, buddy. You deserve some good luck after the year you've had. Just watch your back, okay? Money changes people, and it makes other people crazy. As if to prove his point, my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Tom Bradley, one of my old college friends who hadn't returned my calls since the divorce. Jack! Buddy! I just saw the news. Congratulations, man! Thanks, Tom. Listen, I feel terrible about how things went down during your split with Vanessa. You know how it is. We didn't want to take sides. He meant the entire social circle that had collectively decided I was persona non grata after Vanessa started spreading her version of events. The same people who'd been coming to my barbecues and borrowing my tools for years had suddenly become too busy to return phone calls. What do you want, Tom? Not found, man. Just wanted to reconnect. Maybe we could grab dinner this weekend? Sarah would love to see you. Sarah was Tom's wife and one of Vanessa's closest friends. The idea that she wanted to see me was laughable. I'll think about it. Great! Oh, and Jack, if you need any advice on managing money, investments, that kind of thing, you know I work in finance now. I'd be happy to help out an old friend. I hung up without answering. Phil was shaking his head. Let me guess. Old friend who suddenly remembered your phone number? Tom Bradley. Wants to help me with investments. They're coming out of the woodwork, aren't they? What about Vanessa? I told him about yesterday's phone call and her visit to Rourke. Phil's face darkened as I talked. Jack, you need to be very careful here. Vanessa's smart, and she's got Brady helping her. That kid might be a screw-up, but he knows how to work the system. What do you mean? I mean, I still have friends on the force. Brady Walsh has a record. Nothing major, but enough. Petty theft, check fraud, that kind of thing. The kind of guy who's always looking for an angle. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Mike Stevens, another old friend. Heard about your good fortune. We should celebrate. Drinks on you? Then another from Jennifer Walsh, Brady's sister and someone I'd barely spoken to in years. Jack, so excited for you. We should catch up soon. And another from David Chen, my former neighbor. Congrats on the inheritance. Let's grab lunch and you can tell me all about it. Jesus, I muttered, showing Phil the messages. It's like they coordinated this. They probably did. Vanessa's got a network, Jack. And now that there's money involved, they're all going to want a piece. I was about to respond when the bar door opened and Vanessa walked in, followed by Brady and two people I recognized as Tom and Sarah Bradley. They'd clearly been planning this ambush. Jack, honey, Vanessa said, loud enough for the whole bar to hear. There you are. We've been looking everywhere for you. She was dressed to end. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, the whole performance. Brady lurked behind her like a bodyguard, trying to look intimidating in his leather jacket and designer jeans. What do you want, V? We just want to talk, Jack, as friends. She gestured to Tom and Sarah, who were smiling those fake smiles I remembered from 100 dinner parties. We're all so happy about your good fortune. Are you now? Trolley stepped forward, putting on his best salesman voice. Jack, buddy, we owe you an apology. Things got complicated during the divorce, and we should have handled it better. You mean you should have handled it at all, instead of cutting me off completely? Sarah jumped in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We were just trying to stay neutral, Jack, you understand. Neutral? I looked around the bar. Everyone was watching now, including Murphy himself from behind the bar. Is that what you call it when you have Vanessa over for dinner every week while refusing to take my phone calls? The fake smiles started to slip. Brady stepped forward, and I could see Phil tense up next to me. Look, man, Brady said, maybe we all got off on the wrong foot. But Vanessa's got a legitimate claim to that inheritance, and we're hoping we can work something out without getting lawyers involved. A legitimate claim? We're divorced, Brady. Have been for 3 months. The inheritance was promised while you were still married, Vanessa said, her voice losing some of its sweetness. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half. Your lawyer can go, Jack. Phil's voice was calm but warning. Maybe this isn't the place. But I was past caring about making a scene. These people had abandoned me when I needed them most, and now they wanted back in because they smelled money. You know what, V? You're right. We should work something out. I stood up and everyone in the bar was listening now. Here's my offer. You get exactly what you got in the divorce. Nothing. Because this inheritance isn't about me. It's about my grandfather, who died before I even met you. Jack, be reasonable, Tom started. Reasonable? Like you were reasonable when you stopped inviting me to poker night? Like Sarah was reasonable when she blocked me on social media? Like any of you were reasonable when you decided Vanessa's version of events was the only one that mattered? The bar was dead silent now. Even Murphy had stopped wiping glasses. You want to know what's reasonable? I continued, my voice rising. What's reasonable is that you all stayed loyal to someone who was cheating on her husband for 6 months. What's reasonable is that none of you bothered to ask for my side of the story. What's reasonable is that you're all here now, circling like vultures, because you think there's something in it for you. Brady stepped closer, his face flushing. Watch your mouth, man. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Tell me, Brady, when exactly did you and Vanessa start sleeping together? Before or after she filed for divorce? That hit home. Brady's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment I thought he might actually swing. But Phil was already standing, and despite his limp, he still carried himself like a cop. I think you folks should leave, Phil said quietly. We're not done here, Vanessa said, her mask finally slipping completely. Jack, you can play the victim all you want, but I know you. You're the same small-time loser you always were. The only difference is now you've got money you didn't earn. Maybe, but I've got something else too. What's that? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. I've got all the time in the world to make sure you don't get a penny of it. They left after that, but not before Brady knocked over a chair and Vanessa promised me I'd be hearing from her lawyer. The bar stayed quiet for a long moment after the door closed. Finally, Murphy spoke up from behind the bar. Next round's on the house, Jack. Sounds like you're going to need it. Clapped me on the shoulder. Well, that went well. They're not going to give up, are they? Not a chance. But hey, look on the bright side. What bright side? Now you know exactly who your real friends are. 3 days later, I was starting to understand what Phil meant about money making people crazy. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters, long-lost relatives, investment advisors, and at least a dozen people claiming to be old friends who just wanted to catch up. I'd started letting everything go to voicemail. But when Alden Rourke called at 7 in the morning, his voice shaking with fear, I answered immediately. Jack, thank God. They took me. What? Who took you? Where are you? I don't know where I am. Some kind of warehouse. They grabbed me from my garage last night when I was checking on the cars. Jack, they want the inheritance papers. They want you to sign everything over to Vanessa, or they're going to... Lindsay went dead. My hands were shaking as I called the police. Officer Linda Hall, one of Phil's old partners, took the report seriously, but warned me that kidnapping cases were tricky. Without a ransom demand or proof of life, it's hard to know what we're dealing with, she said. But we'll put out a bolo for Mr. Rourke and start checking his known associates. Officer Hall, I think my ex-wife is involved in this. Wireless. That's a serious accusation, Jack. Do you have any proof? I didn't. Not really. Just a gut feeling and the timing of everything. But as I was talking to Linda, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. If you want to see the old man alive, Bring the inheritance papers to the Riverside warehouse on Industrial Drive. Tonight at midnight. Come alone. And don't call the cops. I showed the text to Linda, and her expression hardened. This just became a kidnapping case. Jack, I need you to let us handle this. They said no cops. Discharged. They always say no cops. That doesn't mean we listen to them. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. Too convenient. Too theatrical. If Vanessa was really behind this, she was smarter than a simple kidnapping plot. She had to know that involving Brady and his criminal friends would only make things worse for her legally. Unless that wasn't the real plan. I spent the day thinking, pacing around my apartment, trying to figure out what Vanessa's real angle was. She was many things, but she wasn't stupid. A kidnapping charge would ruin her career and her reputation. Two things she valued more than money. Around 6 p.m., I got another call from an unknown number. Jack? It was Rourke's voice, but he sounded different, tired. Mr. Rourke, are you okay? Where are you? I'm at home, Jack. I'm sorry. I think there was some confusion earlier. Commencement. Confusion? You called me and said you'd been kidnapped. I don't remember that, son. I've been having some memory issues lately. The doctors say it's related to my heart condition. Sometimes I get confused, disoriented. Melissa dropped. Mr. Rourke, are you sure you're okay? Are you alone? I'm fine, Jack. Just tired. Maybe we should postpone our meeting tomorrow. Shell's line went dead again. But this time, it felt different. Forced. I called Linda immediately. Something's not right. That wasn't the same person who called me this morning. Jack, you said he was 80 years old with a heart condition. It's possible he really is confused. Melting. No. Someone's with him, making him call me. This is part of the plan. Windshield. What plan? I was starting to see it now. The real trap. They don't want to kidnap him. They want to discredit him. If Rourke is declared mentally incompetent, the inheritance could be challenged. Vanessa wouldn't need to prove she deserves half. She'd just need to prove the whole thing was invalid. Linda was quiet for a moment. That's actually pretty smart and much harder to prosecute than kidnapping. I'm going to his house. Jack, if you're right about this, you could be walking into a trap. Then come with me. And later, Linda and I were parked outside Rourke's mansion. The black sedan was back, along with a white van I didn't recognize. The house was dark, except for one light in what I knew was the study. I count at least 3 people inside, Linda said, watching through binoculars. This is definitely not a confused old man having memory problems. What's the plan? The plan is, we call for backup and do this by the book. But before she could reach for her radio, my phone rang. Vanessa's number. Jack, sweetie, I hope you're not doing anything stupid right now. Where are you, V? I'm at home, having dinner with friends. Tom and Sarah are here, and Brady's making his famous pasta sauce. We're having a lovely evening. The perfect alibi. While she was establishing her whereabouts with witnesses, her accomplices were handling the dirty work. What do you want? I want you to be smart, Jack. Mr. Rourke is a sick old man who's been taken advantage of by an opportunistic courier driver. That's going to be the story when this all comes out. The question is whether you want to be seen as a victim of his confusion, or as someone who knowingly exploited a man with dementia. Unrestricted. He doesn't have dementia. Doesn't he? I have medical records that say otherwise. Records that will be very interesting to the probate court. You're lying. Am I? Jack, honey, you're out of your league here. This isn't about what's fair or right. This is about what can be proven in court. And I can prove that Alden Rourke has been suffering from progressive dementia for the past 6 months. I can prove that he's been making increasingly erratic decisions. And I can prove that you took advantage of a vulnerable old man for financial gain. My blood was boiling, but I forced myself to stay calm. And what do you get out of this, V? If the inheritance is invalid, you don't get anything either. True, but I also don't have to watch my ex-husband become rich while I'm still paying off legal bills from our divorce. Sometimes it's not about winning, Jack. Sometimes it's just about making sure the other person loses. The line went dead. Linda was looking at me with concern. Jack, what did she say? She's not after the money. She just wants to destroy it so I can't have it. That's actually worse than greed. That's pure spite. And she's smart enough to make it work. Linda called for backup, but we both knew it would take at least 20 minutes for units to arrive. In the meantime, we watched the house and tried to figure out what was happening inside. At 11:30, the front door opened, and two men came out, supporting Rourke between them. Even from a distance, I could see that he was barely conscious. They're moving him, Linda whispered into her radio. Suspect appears to be sedated or injured. The men Rourke into the white van while a third person, Brady, I was pretty sure, got into the black sedan. Both vehicles started to pull away. We have to follow them, I said. We have to wait for backup. LinkedIn, by the time backup gets here, they'll be gone. And Rourke might be dead. She looked at me for a long moment, then started the engine. If this goes wrong, I'm blaming you. Fair enough. The van led us through the industrial part of town, past abandoned factories and empty lots. It was the perfect place for something bad to happen to someone. And I was starting to think Vanessa's plan was more violent than I'd given her credit for. There, Linda said, pointing to the Riverside warehouse.
They're stopping.
We parked a block away and watched as Brady and the two men, who I now recognized as Eddie Torino and Vic Castellano, small-time criminals who'd been in and out of jail for years, carried Rourke into the building. Okay, here's what we're going to do, Linda said, checking her service tool. I'm going to call this in and wait for backup. You're going to stay in the car and not do anything stupid. Linda, Jack, I'm serious. These guys have nothing to lose, and if they're working for your ex-wife, they're probably not planning to leave witnesses. She was right, of course, but sitting in the car while an 80-year-old man was being held by criminals felt like cowardice. How long until backup arrives? 15 minutes. Maybe 20. He might not have 20 minutes. Linda sighed. Jack, if we go in there without backup and something happens to us, Rourke dies anyway, and Vanessa gets away with it. And if we wait and he dies while we're sitting here, I have to live with that for the rest of my life. We stared at each other for a moment. Finally, Linda shook her head. You're just like your grandfather, aren't you? Phil told me Henry Thompson never backed down from a fight, even when he should have. Is that a yes? We're both probably going to get fired for this, but let's go save an old man. The warehouse had been abandoned for years, but someone had been using it recently. There were fresh tire tracks in the dirt and cigarette butts by the loading dock. Linda found an unlocked side door, and we made our way inside. The main floor was empty except for some old machinery and stacks of wooden pallets, but there was light coming from an office on the second floor, and I could hear voices. Told you not to hurt him, Brady was saying. We just need him confused enough to sign the papers. He's not signing anything, Eddie's voice replied. Old bastard keeps asking for Jack. Maybe we should just... A third voice, one I didn't recognize. The plan is to make it look like natural causes. Heart attack brought on by stress. No violence, no evidence. Linda and I exchanged glances. They weren't just planning to discredit Rourke. They were planning to end him. We made our way up a metal staircase, trying to stay quiet. The office door was partially open and I could see inside. Rourke was tied to a chair, his head lolling forward. Brady was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated. Eddie and Vic were standing by the window, and there was a fourth man I didn't recognize. Older, wearing a suit, probably the one calling the shots. The injection should work within an hour, Suitman was saying. It'll look like cardiac arrest. The old man's been having heart problems for months. What about Jack? Brady asked. He's going to know something's wrong. Jack Thompson is a divorced courier driver with no money and no connections. Who's going to believe him? Especially when the medical examiner finds that Mr. Rourke died of natural causes. Linda tapped me on the shoulder and pointed back toward the stairs. She wanted us to retreat and wait for backup. But as we started to move, I heard Rourke's voice, weak but clear. Unrest. Henry. Henry, where are you, Henry? Henry, where are you? The Chinese are coming. He was delirious, probably from whatever they'd given him. But hearing him call for my grandfather broke something inside me. I pushed past Linda and kicked open the office door. "Right here, Mr. Rourke. Henry's grandson is right here." Fleming, after erupted in chaos. Brady spun around, his face going white when he saw me. Eddie reached for something under his jacket, but Linda was already moving, her tool drawn. "Police! Everyone on the ground! Now!" Suitman dove behind a desk. Vic bolted for a back door. Eddie, apparently deciding that a tool fight with a cop wasn't worth whatever Vanessa was paying him, raised his hands and dropped to his knees. Brady, however, had other ideas. He grabbed a metal pipe from somewhere and swung it at my head. I ducked, and the pipe crashed into the wall behind me, sending up a shower of sparks from some old electrical wiring. "You ruined everything!" Brady screamed, swinging the pipe again. "She was going to leave you anyway, but you had to make it about money." I caught the pipe on the second swing and twisted it out of his hands. Brady stumbled backward, tripped over his own feet, and went down hard. "It was never about money, Brady. It was about respect, something you wouldn't understand." Linda had Eddie cuffed and was working on Vic, who'd apparently changed his mind about running when he saw her tool. Suitman was still hiding behind the desk, but I could hear him talking frantically on a cell phone. "Yeah, it's blown. The cops are here. I don't know how they found us." "No, I'm not taking the fall for this." I walked over to Rourke and started untying him. His pulse was weak but steady, and his breathing seemed normal. Whatever they'd given him, it didn't seem to be working fast. "Mr. Rourke, can you hear me? It's Jack." His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment they were clear and focused. "Jack, they wanted me to sign papers. Said you were in trouble." "I know, but you're safe now. We're going to get you to a hospital." "The inheritance. They said it wasn't legal." "Don't worry about that now. Just rest." But grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Jack, listen to me. There's something I need to tell you. About your grandfather. About why I really wanted to leave you everything. Mr. Rourke, you need to save your strength." "No, this is important." His voice was getting stronger, as if the urgency was burning off whatever pills they'd given him. "Henry didn't just save my life in Korea. He saved my soul." Linda was calling for ambulances and backup, but I could tell she was listening too. "I was a coward, Jack. When the combat started, I froze, left my squad behind and ran. Henry found me hiding in a bunker, crying like a baby. He could have reported me, had me court-martialed. Instead, he talked me through it, helped me find my courage. By the end of the war, I was leading men into battle. Mr. Rourke, everything I built, everything I became, I owe to your grandfather. This inheritance isn't charity, son. It's a debt I've been trying to repay for 70 years. Minimized Man chose that moment to make his move. He came up from behind the desk with a tool, but his hands were shaking and his aim was off. The blast went wide, shattering a window. Linda spun around and put 2 rounds center mass. Suitman went down and stayed down. "Jesus," Brady whispered from where he was lying on the floor. "You ended him." "He fired first," Linda said calmly, already calling it in. "And next time, maybe don't kidnap people." Next hour was a blur of ambulances, police cars, and crime scene technicians. Rourke was taken to the hospital for observation, but the doctor said he was going to be fine. The pills they'd given him was a mild sedative, not the lethal injection they'd planned. Eddie and Vic were arrested and charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, and a dozen other felonies. Brady was looking at similar charges, plus assault for coming at me with the pipe. But the real prize was Suitman's cell phone. "Dr. Marcus Webb," Linda said, reading from the phone's contact list. "Apparently your ex-wife's been planning this for weeks. Text messages, payment records, the whole thing. Dr. Webb, it turned out, was a disgraced psychiatrist who'd been making money on the side by providing fake medical evaluations for insurance fraud cases. Vanessa had hired him to create a false dementia diagnosis for Rourke, planning to use it to invalidate the inheritance. When the kidnapping plan went wrong, Webb had decided to eliminate Rourke permanently rather than risk exposure." "What about Vanessa?" I asked. "Oh, we're going to have a very interesting conversation with Miss Thompson. Or should I say, Ms. Morrison. She changed her name back already. She's going to claim she didn't know about the kidnapping, Maybe, but she's all over Webb's phone. Planning meetings, payment schedules, instructions about how to handle Rourke. Even if she didn't know they were going to grab him tonight, she's definitely guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud. As Linda was explaining the charges, my phone rang. Vanessa's number. Jack, thank God you're okay. I just heard about what happened.
Are you hurt? The performance was flawless. Concern, fear, relief.
If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her. I'm fine, V. Thanks for asking. I can't believe Brady would do something like this. I knew he had problems, but kidnapping? Jack, I'm so sorry. I feel responsible. You? Of course I do. If I hadn't been so angry about the inheritance, maybe he wouldn't have felt like he needed to fix things for me. Limestone Linda was listening on an extension, recording everything. So you're saying you didn't know about any of this? Jack, how can you even ask me that? I would never. I mean, yes, I thought the inheritance should be split fairly, but I would never hurt anyone over it. What about Dr. Webb? There was a pause. Just a heartbeat, but long enough. I don't know who that is. Really? Because his phone says you've been texting him for 3 weeks. Another pause. Longer this time. Jack, I think I should call my lawyer. Good idea, V. You're going to need one. The trial took 8 months. Vanessa hired 2 and arranged that 40,000 box sports. Invested in 10 days a mitic, but the evidence was overwhelming. Webb's phone contained detailed records of their conspiracy, including payments totaling $50,000 and explicit instructions about how to make Rourke appear mentally incompetent. Brady rolled over immediately, testifying that Vanessa had promised him a cut of the inheritance if he could help her fix the problem. Eddie and Vic, facing decades in prison, also cooperated with prosecutors. The kidnapping charges didn't stick. Vanessa's lawyers successfully argued that she hadn't known about Webb's plan to grab Rourke from his house. But the conspiracy and fraud charges were solid. In the end, she got 18 months in federal prison and 5 years probation. Brady got 2 years. Webb, who'd been planning to end an 80-year-old war veteran, got 15 to life.
But the real justice came before the sentencing. I was at Murphy's bar, celebrating the verdict with Phil and some of the other regulars, when Tom Bradley walked in. He looked terrible, hollow-eyed, unshaven, like he hadn't slept in weeks. Jack, can I talk to you? Phil started to object, but I waved him off. Tom had been one of Vanessa's most vocal supporters during the divorce, and I was curious to hear what he had to say now that she was a convicted felon. What's up, Tom? I owe you an apology, a real one, not the fake crap I tried to feed you before. Okay. Sarah and I, we got pulled into Vanessa's version of events. She made it sound like you were this controlling, emotionally harmful husband who was holding her back. She had examples, stories, things that sounded convincing, such as embarrassed. She said you monitored her phone calls, that you got angry when she worked late, that you tried to isolate her from her friends. Tom, I worked 60 hours a week driving a delivery truck. I was barely home long enough to monitor anything. And the reason I got upset about her working late was because she wasn't actually working. I know that now, after the trial, after everything came out. Jack, she played us, all of us. She had this whole story about being trapped in an unhappy marriage, and we bought it. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that some of us figured it out. Not all of your old friends are like Brady and his crowd. Some of us just made a mistake. I looked at Tom for a long moment. He seemed genuinely remorseful. But 18 months of betrayal wasn't something I could just forgive because he'd finally seen the truth. Tom, I appreciate the apology. I really do. But you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. When things got complicated, you chose to believe the worst about someone you'd known for 15 years. That says something about your character, not just your judgment. Jack, I'm not saying you're a bad person, but I am saying that trust, once broken, doesn't just snap back into place because you realize you were wrong. Tom nodded slowly. I understand. For what it's worth, I'm glad things worked out for you. You deserved better than what we gave you. After he left, Phil raised his beer in a toast.
to finding out who your real friends are. I'll drink to that. But the best moment came 3 days later, when I was visiting Rourke at his mansion. The old man had recovered completely from his ordeal and was back to his usual self, sharp, funny, and determined to make the most of whatever time he had left. "Jack, there's something I want to show you." He led me to his study, where he'd set up a display case containing my grandfather's military medals, letters from the war, and photographs I'd never seen before. I've been collecting these for years, tracking down pieces of Henry's service record. I wanted to make sure his sacrifice was remembered properly. "Mr. Rourke, this is incredible. I had no idea any of this existed." "There's more." He handed me a thick folder. "I've been in touch with the Army Historical Foundation. They're going to name the new Veterans Memorial Wing after Henry Thompson. Your grandfather is going to be remembered as the hero he was." I felt tears in my eyes as I looked through the documents. My grandfather, who died when I was 12, was going to have his courage and sacrifice recognized in a way that would last long after all of us were gone. "There's one more thing," Rourke said, his voice getting emotional. "I've rewritten my will. When I die, everything goes to you, as planned. But I've also set up a foundation, the Henry Thompson Foundation for Veterans Services. It'll be funded by half the estate, and it'll help veterans transition back to civilian life." "Mr. Rourke, that's perfect. Your grandfather saved my life, Jack. But more than that, he taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when you are afraid. You showed that same courage when you came after me in that warehouse. I had help. Yes, you did. And that's another lesson Henry taught me. The importance of having good people around you when things get tough. As I was leaving that day, I ran into Jennifer Walsh in the driveway. Brady's sister had been one of the fake friends who'd suddenly reappeared when news of the inheritance broke. Now, she looked nervous and embarrassed. "Jack, hi. I wanted to check on Mr. Rourke. Make sure he was okay after everything that happened." "Finer, Jennifer. Thanks for asking. About Brady, I know what he did was wrong, but he's still my brother, and he's going to prison for 2 years, which is exactly what he deserves." "I know, but couldn't you maybe write a letter to the judge? Ask for leniency? Brady's not a bad person. He just got caught up in Vanessa's schemes." I stared at her for a moment, amazed by the audacity. "Jennifer, your brother participated in the kidnapping of an 80-year-old war veteran. He tried to hit me with a metal pipe, and you want me to ask for leniency? He was just trying to help Vanessa. He thought he was doing the right thing." "No, he thought he was going to get rich. There's a difference. Jack, please. He's learned his lesson. He'll never do anything like this again." "Right, he won't, because he's going to be in prison." Jennifer's face hardened. "You know, everyone always said you were vindictive. I guess they were right." "Everyone? You mean Vanessa and her friends? The same people who are now convicted felons? You could have stopped this before it went so far. You could have just shared the inheritance, been reasonable about it." "Reasonable?" I shook my head. "You know what would have been reasonable, Jennifer? If your brother hadn't helped my ex-wife try to destroy an old man's life for money. If he hadn't committed multiple felonies. If he hadn't tried to assault me with a tool. So you're just going to let him rot in prison? I'm going to let him face the consequences of his choices. Just like Vanessa is facing the consequences of hers." Jennifer stormed off, but not before delivering one final blow. "I hope you're happy with yourself, Jack. I hope the money was worth destroying so many lives." Propulsion Her Drive watched her drive away, then looked back at Rourke's mansion. Through the window, I could see the old man in his study, probably reading or working on his memoirs. A good man who'd spent 70 years trying to repay a debt of honor, nearly destroyed by people who saw him as nothing more than a source of easy money. "Yeah, Jennifer," I said to myself, "I'm happy with myself." For the first time in a long time. When I was standing in the main showroom of Thompson Classic Cars, watching as the last customer of the day admired a restored 1967 Mustang. The dealership had become more successful than Rourke had ever imagined, partly because of the publicity from the trial, but mostly because we'd built a reputation for honest dealing and quality work. Rourke had insisted on staying involved in the day-to-day operations, despite his age and health issues. He claimed the work kept him young, and looking at him now, animated and enthusiastic as he explained the car's history to a potential buyer, I believed him.
Another satisfied customer, he said as the man left with a sales contract.
You know, Jack, I think Henry would be proud of what we've built here. I think so too. With a text message. It was from Phil. Turn on channel 7. You're going to want to see this. I TV in the office and switched to the local news. The anchor was standing outside the federal courthouse, and the headline read, Former corporate executive released from prison. Manslaughter. Vanessa Morrison, formerly Thompson, was released today after serving 14 months of an 18-month sentence for conspiracy and fraud. Morrison, who was convicted of attempting to fraudulently obtain a multi-million-dollar inheritance, will serve the remainder of her sentence under house arrest. The camera showed Vanessa walking down the courthouse steps, flanked by her lawyer and what looked like a small crowd of supporters. She'd lost weight in prison, and her hair was shorter, but she still carried herself with that familiar arrogance. A reporter shoved a microphone in her face. Miss Morrison, do you have any regrets about your actions? I regret that a personal dispute between ex-spouses was blown out of proportion by an overzealous prosecutor, Vanessa replied smoothly. I've paid my debt to society, and now I'm looking forward to rebuilding my life. Dismissed. What about Jack Thompson? Do you have anything to say to your ex-husband? Ragos Vanessa looked directly into the camera, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the old hatred. I hope Jack has found happiness with his inherited wealth. Some people are born lucky, and others have to work for everything they get. The reporter pressed. But wasn't this inheritance earned by Mr. Thompson's grandfather through military service? Shields. No comment. As Vanessa walked away, the reporter turned back to the camera. Morrison will be living under house arrest at her sister's home in Springfield while serving out the remainder of her sentence. She is prohibited from contacting any of the victims in the case, including her ex-husband and Alden Rourke, the elderly man at the center of the conspiracy. I turned off the TV and found Rourke watching me with concern. How do you feel about her getting out early? Membership? I don't feel much of anything. She's out of my life and she's going to stay that way. That's probably the healthiest attitude you could have. Besides, I added, she's still got 3.5 years of probation ahead of her. One violation, and she goes back inside. Mikhail, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. But when I answered, the voice was familiar. Jack? It's Tom Bradley. I hope you don't mind me calling. What do you want, Tom? Remodeling. I just saw the news about Vanessa getting out. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine. Good. Listen, Jack. I know things between us are still complicated. But I wanted you to know that Sarah and I have been talking about everything that happened. About the choices we made. And we realize we were wrong. Not just about believing Vanessa's stories, but about abandoning a friend when he needed us. That's not who we want to be. I was quiet for a moment, thinking about forgiveness and second chances. Tom, I appreciate you calling, I really do. But I'm not ready to pretend the last 2 years didn't happen. I understand. But maybe someday we could try again? Start over? Maybe, but it would have to be a real fresh start, not just picking up where we left off. Unless you're ready. After I hung up, Rourke smiled at me. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, you know. Is that what you did? With the people who abandoned you after the war? Some of them. The ones who were genuinely sorry and willing to do the work to rebuild trust. Others, he shrugged. Some bridges once burned are better left as ashes. That evening, I drove to the Veterans Memorial, where my grandfather's name was now prominently displayed on the new Henry Thompson wing. I'd started coming here when I needed to think, when the weight of everything that had happened felt too heavy to carry alone. Hey, Grandpa, I said, sitting on the bench facing his memorial plaque. I think you'd like Mr. Rourke. He's got your sense of honor, your stubborn streak. He says I've got your jawline and your tendency to fight for lost causes. breeze rustled the flags surrounding the memorial. Vanessa got out of prison today. I thought I'd be angrier about it, but mostly I just feel free. Like the last chain connecting me to that part of my life finally broke. I sat there for a while, watching the sun set over the memorial garden. When I finally got up to leave, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd finally delivered the last package from my old life and could start fresh. As I walked back to my car, a restored 1969 Camaro from Rourke's personal collection, my phone buzzed with one final text of the day. It was from an unknown number. "Jack, this is Vanessa. I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I wanted you to know that this isn't over. You took everything from me, and someday I'm going to return the favor." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it and blocked the number. Some people never learned, never changed, never accepted responsibility for their actions. But that was Vanessa's problem now, not mine. I drove home through the quiet streets of my town, past the bar where Phil was probably holding court with the regulars, past the courthouse where justice had finally been served, past the apartment building where I'd lived during the darkest period of my life. Now I lived in Rourke's mansion. Our mansion, he insisted, since we were family now in all the ways that mattered. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in a house filled with history and honor, go to work at a business built on integrity and craftsmanship, and continue building a life that my grandfather would have been proud of. The package had finally been delivered. The debt had been paid. And for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged.